In the 2 years between Canadian Pacific's and Kansas City Southern's merger announcement and the formation date of CPKC, the plans for the north-south corridor spanning the entire continent was the main focus. Many were left curious of where exactly the Meridian Speedway would fall into the vision of the new railroad. Some thought that business would proceed as usual with no significant changes, and a very select few even thought that CPKC would sell off the line to Norfolk Southern, which doesn't make the most sense, but people still thought it. For those who may be new to the channel or could just use a quick refresher, the Meridian Speedway is a rail route located between Shreveport, Louisiana and Meridian, Mississippi. Just less than 3 decades ago, this route was owned by a small Mid-South Rail Corporation, which took possession from the Illinois Central Gulf. The Kansas City Southern would acquire the Mid-South along with all of their properties, and that included the over 300-mile line that would become the Speedway. 12 years after taking over operations, neighboring Class 1 to the East Norfolk Southern and the KCS would form a joint venture known as the Meridian Speedway. With a 30% claim in the agreement, Norfolk Southern would send fundings to rehabilitate the entire route and upgrade it to pristine condition. Some of the upgrades included would be new signal technology, major sidings being constructed, or the old ones simply being extended. And with the line upgraded, the Speedway would become a vital artery in the supply chain in the southeastern United States. It acts as the fastest route between the Northeast and the transportation hub of Dallas, and also is planted right in the middle of the quickest route from Los Angeles of Southern California to the various cities in the Southeast, such as Atlanta, Georgia. The intermodal traffic seen on the Speedway has all been run through aside from smaller cuts of stacks thrown onto manifests. The vast majority of containers you'll spot come from foreign roads such as Norfolk Southern and Union Pacific. The KCS and now CPKC simply serve as the middleman connecting Union Pacific coast to coast, and Norfolk Southern would stack trains bound for DFW or Atlanta. For CPKC, this has been a solid business model and they could easily just sit back and let it bring in the revenue. But the newly formed Class 1 has already proven that it plans to rise up in the ranks despite being the smallest of the Class 1 railroads. Intermodal traffic has been the top priority in CPKC's vision since well before its formation in April. In the first 6 months of operation, deals have been struck with major logistic carriers such as Schneider and Knight-Swift to act as the primary railroad to haul cargo down south to Mexico. In May of this year, the Mexico Midwest Express intermodal service began. Trains 180 and 181 have become the first single-line service to connect the American Midwest to the heart of Mexico. Paired with the fastest transit times, the service seems to be a success. There have been several trains with short links, but CPKC seems to be dedicated in keeping the MMX its own dedicated train to ensure it keeps its quick transit times. Now focusing back towards the Speedway, in summer of this year, it was announced that CPKC and CSX Transportation would be locking arms together to expand their intermodal traffic. This isn't the first instance these two have collaborated, with the announcement that both companies would be working together on a hydrogen-powered locomotive program. For years, CSX has been itching to gain access onto the Meridian Speedway as NS has reaped all of its benefits. During the STB approval process of the merger, CSX would try to butt in and gain haulage rights, but it was to no avail. But in July of this year, the first steps to success for CSX aspirations were taken. It would be announced that CPKC and CSX would both be purchasing the Meridian and Bigby Shortline Railroad owned by operator Genesee & Wyoming. This 168-mile railroad connects with the CSX in Alabama and has direct access to the CPKC Speedway in Meridian, Mississippi. CSX will buy the eastern portion, while CPKC will acquire the west half. It is worth noting that the MNBR will still exist to serve local customers, since the Class 1s are focused on simply swapping off their trains. CSX wants better access into southeast Texas and deeper south into Mexico. Currently, CSX must traverse across the coastline of the Gulf of Mexico, where it will interchange with UP in New Orleans, Louisiana. Union Pacific takes the freight on down to the U.S.-Mexican border, and who do you ask takes it from there? Well, that would be CPKC de Mexico. Along with avoiding the always congested New Orleans, CSX would also be able to cut out the middleman completely without adding much transit time if there's even any at all. While I'm sure the Great Big Rollin' Railroad isn't thrilled at this development, Norfolk Southern is more than likely furious. With CSX being its top competitor, you can only imagine why. NS does have exclusive intermodal rights on the Speedway, but only for traffic moving to and from Dallas and westward. To my knowledge, the original agreements did not include South Texas and Mexico, so CPKC found quite the profitable loophole. As of now, the goal is to have the intermodal service begin in later 2024. Tagged along with the intermodal cargo, the opportunities for auto rack traffic will be present as well. By 2026, there will be multiple automotive manufacturing facilities completed, scattered throughout the Southeast on the CSX system. While we are still a ways out, traffic on the Speedway could have a significant increase. Analysts from both railroads expect 3 trains each direction will be handed off on the Meridian and Bigby meet point. The idea of purchasing the MNBR is not a new one though. Former CEO of Kansas City Southern, Michael Haverty, who can be contributed with leading the charge on the original Meridian Speedway agreement, also reached out to CSX to purchase the Meridian and Bigby 2 decades ago. While meetings took place, nothing ever came out of them, but even well after his retirement, Haverty just might see his vision coming to fruition. So I mentioned earlier that UP and NS haven't been entirely pleased with the consequences of the formation of CPKC due to the great increase in competition introduced. To add salt into that wound, CPKC has recently enforced a length cap for trains traversing the Speedway. No trains will be allowed to be longer than 8,500 feet, and the only train affected by this is Union Pacific's daily haulage right intermodal ZLAAI. Union Pacific averages 11,000 feet in length for this train, so that's a little less than half a mile's worth of cargo having to be rerouted on other trains up through Arkansas and eventually to Memphis, Tennessee to hand off to NS. Unfortunately for both companies, this adds about 2 days of transit time according to Trains Magazine. Now, CPKC isn't enforcing this policy to hurt UP necessarily, but the truth is the Speedway doesn't have the capacity to support these monster-sized trains. Only 3 sidings in the over 300 miles can hold an 11,000-foot train, and most sidings are around the 8,500 feet mark. Conveniently, just days after this announcement, Union Pacific would announce a new intermodal service similar to CPKC's and CSX's idea. Traffic spanning from Mexico into the Southeast, but they will not be utilizing the Speedway, but instead taking their own track up to Memphis to hand off to both Norfolk Southern and CSX. It's worth noting that this service will have a huge head start versus the CPKC/CSX service, which, like I said, isn't slated to start until late 2024. Now that's all about I got on the updates on the Meridian Speedway and the related railroad competitive efforts. If you are interested in sticking around though, I'd like to share my analysis and thoughts of all this. So as someone who has been around the Meridian Speedway since before it was even known by that name, I am absolutely thrilled to see the potential growth in traffic and freight numbers, all while keeping trains at a reasonable length instead of building these 2 or 3 mile PSR monsters. Despite many saying that the combination of CP and KCS would heavily decrease competition, the outcome could not be more than the opposite. I've never seen so many headlines of other Class 1s introducing new intermodal service this much. This includes the one I mentioned earlier, but also the proposed Falcon service between Union Pacific, Canadian National, and Ferromex. These routes have existed a long time, and it only took CPKC to change the industry for these other railroads to up their game. While the head start of UP and its eastern counterpart service will have a good chance of success in the short term, as soon as the service between CSX and CPKC begins, I think that business will shift for the Speedway. Not only is it the quickest route by not hours but days, but CPKC's Mexican presence means that just one less railroad has to interchange. I could go on all day about this, but I'll leave it at that. While I studied supply chain management and logistics in college, I am by no means an expert on these matters. But if you agree or disagree, leave your thoughts down in the comments below. I'd love to have all of y'all's takes on this. If you did enjoy the video, I'd appreciate you hitting the thumbs up button down below, and maybe subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Y'all seem to enjoy these updates in the industry videos, so I'll be sure to make more when new developments arise. Until the next time, my friends, I'll be seeing you somewhere out there along the rails, and as always, thanks for watching.